What is up, everybody? Welcome to Illuminate Student Ministry Live Round 3.
Oh man, 3 already?
I know.
We haven't died yet, so that's
Agreed.
Well.
Agreed. Does it feel like 3 weeks of quarantine? Well, I guess it's only been 2 weeks of quarantine and then 3 weeks of chaos. But are you guys doing all right? Staying up and... I mean, what's the best thing you've been able to do during quarantine?
Read. So much reading that I didn't have time for before, but my sleep schedule is all messed up.
Leaders are readers, so you are now a better leader because you have become a reader. So
Thanks.
That's awesome. Tracy, what about you, man? What is something you have done during this very messy...
Actually, I've done more reading as well since we started this, and I've also played more video games in the last 2 weeks than I have probably in the last 3 months. Just for time.
I would agree. I played an entire season of Madden yesterday.
One day.
That's 16 games.
How long did that take?
8 minutes each quarter times 4. So 32 times 16, that's a lot. I don't really want to do the math. But yeah, so that was a lot of time with a little bit of food involved. And then I left the house at like 8 and went to Walmart to walk around. So that's been my quarantine boredom.
Trey says, "Oh no, Tracy is turning into Remy."
Have you? Did you go before they built the little barrier or after the little barrier?
No, I've been there twice with the barrier.
With the barrier?
Have been real rebellious, feeling and wanting to walk in like under the cone. Actually, I have done it under the cones rather than around and into the cone lane. But yeah, that's not good. But well, hey, what's up, everyone? We are excited that you've tuned in. We hope that you guys are doing better with this quarantine than we are. I know that we.
What's been the best thing you guys have done?
Yeah,
like,
comment on it.
I know that there are a lot of you who have shared that same fun of video games, except for those middle school boys especially who I tried to connect with yesterday and you just left me hanging, so that's on you.
Ouch.
But thank you, Remy and Colin, for being proactive and caring enough to actually tune in. Sorry they bailed on us with that. But yeah, so video games I believe are probably largely for you. But hopefully you guys have found something to do, whether it's reading, drawing, coloring, playing video games, going for walks. I know I am not bored enough to go for a run every day yet, so we should be good with that. But we are going to change things up a little bit. We used to start with the whole questions thing and kind of get to know each other a little bit better. I think you guys know us fairly well, which is good, from a celebrity crush all the way to obviously seeing us eat peppers and everything else. And we have another amazing challenge for tonight. That's real sticky, but you know, we're just gonna tackle this first. So, guys,
I used to love youth ministry games, so I had to do them every week.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, these games,
Best game ever.
Planning games for sure is not my fun thing. But guys, we're gonna jump into the book of James. We started this series last week after we ended our previous series on the parables of Jesus. But we're going to jump into James chapter 2. Like I said, the next several weeks we're going to just tackle the entire book of James. We're going to hit some main points of James's challenges, arguments, main points that he has to his audience. And so we're going to be in James chapter 2 today and focus more so on verses 14 through 20. But again, just to kind of get you warmed up on the book of James, kind of the background, the audience, Tracy wants to refresh you on that just in case you forgot.
Yeah, but we just got a comment that was over 500 minutes on Madden, like 8 hours.
Want to make it super clear that the original comment was 512 hours
in
math.
And your teacher is Mandy.
I wasn't gonna go there.
She's shaking her head. No, that's all online. She doesn't do that.
512
she
hours.
It's about 8 hours.
No way. Oof. Yeah, that's about right. I will say I have broken every single season record in
So that makes it
NFL
okay.
history. Yeah, it makes it okay.
Remy said his record is 1,080
Tom Brady has
hours. That's what I'm gonna go with.
no Madden power on my quarterback, so
And Jenny said she's been baking a lot of food.
nice. Where's my delivery?
I know.
Yeah,
So there's all this food. If it doesn't get delivered, it didn't happen.
exactly. And you can just leave it on my front
So into James, if you guys remember last week, James was actually written to Jewish believers, and so this book is for believers, people who are following Jesus. James is Jesus' half brother. They share a mom, but if you guys, I don't know if you guys realize this or not, but Jesus' dad was God. He didn't have an earthly father per se. That's not how that worked. And
why though?
if you want to know more of that, be sure and hook up
Ask
with Daniel
Daniel.
later.
That's
That's
great.
that's
Okay,
a
we can
topic
do
that
that.
would take way more
can-
than we have
can do
time
that.
for.
No, that's cool.
But yeah, Jesus' father was God, and then James had an earthly father, and so that's how that works. They were half brothers, but again, he's writing to a Jewish community of believers, and so if you're not a follower of Jesus, some of these things don't necessarily pertain to you originally, because it was written for people who follow Jesus. But if you do call yourself a follower of Jesus, if you are going, I'm a Christian, then these are things that we need to take into account rather than just blow them off.
Yeah.
Because this is kind of how the world sees us. It's kind of our manual to get through life.
Yeah, and obviously the book of James was written so many years ago, but it still applies to us, right? And so clearly the challenges that James offered back then and kind of the main points, I don't want to say necessarily didn't stick, but obviously they still apply, and obviously we still need them. And so again, James kind of writes in a way that he tackles main topics that are kind of in your face, and he's kind of blunt. That's why we know that he shares genealogy with Jesus, because he's blunt. He's in your face. He's willing to speak truth in a way that he's not edging around the truth. He's direct. And so we continue to look at the book of James, and again, I'm gonna just say it's verses 14 through 20. And this topic that he's talking about is actually faith and works, or faith and action. Okay, different translations kind of use different words. It's works or deeds or actions. But this is from the New Living Translation. If you guys have that, great. You can follow along with me even better. If not, it's going to sound pretty similar. But different translations sometimes just have different wordings. And so here we go. James chapter 2, verses 14 through 20. It says, "What good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions?" Some other translations will say deeds or works. "Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, 'Goodbye and have a good day. Stay warm and eat well.'" In other words, you wish them the best, or you say, "I'll pray for you." It's kind of those things. But then you don't give that person any food or clothing. In other words, you don't fill in the gap for them. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds. It is dead and useless. Now someone may argue, some people have faith, others have good deeds. But I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have good deeds? I will show you my faith by my good deeds. You say you have faith, for you believe that there is one God. Good for you. Even the demons believe this, and they tremble in terror. How foolish. Can't you see that faith without good deeds is useless? And so I want to start off with this, and I really love this passage. It's one of my biggest passions to talk about. Not just a belief. It's not just following Jesus is not just a one moment, one declaration feeling where it's a camp high or a retreat high or I'm in a really low point in my life, and so Jesus might be a solution, and so I'm going to make this declaration in my head, right? It's not just a head declaration. And so what James is saying is that and we're going to go into the Apostle Paul and kind of his argument with this, or kind of along the lines of the same topic, is that if your faith does not produce action, you need to question your faith. Your faith is in question. And the Apostle Paul, like I just said, in chapter 5 of Romans, he talks about this whole idea. And I want to preface this before I read this, because The Apostle Paul is not in opposition to James. Okay, and that is kind of an idea, a theory out there that these two are in opposition to each other and that it's a contradiction. Okay, and a lot of times, especially if people are trying to disprove the Bible, they want to find contradictions. They want to find things where the Bible says the opposite or something that's not totally relevant or correct to what else has been said. And so this is one of those sections or correlative sections. And so Paul says this in Romans 5. He says, therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Understand, justified by faith. Through whom also we have obtained our introduction by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we exalt in hope of the glory of God. And so Paul is emphasizing justification by faith. You are justified by your faith. Paul is exactly right. Okay, we believe as followers of Jesus, you are justified. You are brought into the house of God. You are brought into the family of God by your faith. It's that declaration, but again, it's not, and we'll get into this in a second, it's not a one-moment thing. So faith is the justifier. Okay, now other religions, other denominations even will say it's because you have to be good enough, right? You have to earn it. It's by your good works that you go to heaven, right? Or that you earn salvation, where it's not, right? Like those are not true. That's not truth. Paul confronts that it is by your faith, your relationship with Jesus, and admitting and confessing him as Lord that you find that salvation, okay, that you are granted salvation. And so, again, faith is the justifier, but your actions, your deeds, your works, whatever word they use, right, in your translation, is the overflow of that faith. In other words, it comes out of your faith. If your faith is genuine, you will act upon it. You will live that out. You had an illustration, Tracy, that you wanted to give about this.
Yeah, to me, it's the same thing as saying, if you're standing out on a cold winter day going, I believe this coat will keep me warm, but you never put it on. Do you really believe it'll keep you warm? Because if you did, the action from that belief would be to put the coat on and at least try it to see if it would work.
Yeah. Yeah, and oftentimes too, and I think this is more of a belief than it is a faith kind of circumstance too, we treat Jesus like a jacket, right? Well, I need him now, I'm going to throw it on. But then when you get through the storm or you get through the valley or you get what you were looking for, it comes off. Right? Oh, I'm good. I don't need Jesus. Thank you for getting me through this process, and now I can take this jacket off, and I'll just put it on the hanger until I need it again. And so oftentimes we treat our relationship with God that way. And then in verse 15 and 16, he says this, and this is back in the James chapter. He talks about someone in need. He says, if they're without food or without clothing, are we those people that show up in that person's life and say, I'm going to pray for you, or I wish you the best, but really don't fill in the void? And we were talking earlier about this and kind of about the church. What's the church's role in this, Tracy?
I think if you look at it, he talks about coming across someone. And I think the church so many times is like, if someone shows up at our doorstep, we'll think about helping them. And a lot of times, sadly, it doesn't even get that far. Churches are, how many people heard I'll pray for you? Or we were talking earlier about send good vibes, whatever that means.
Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers, and we have the ability to actually solve the problem, but don't. And I think the other aspect that even churches that are willing to step up and solve the problem has to come to your doorstep. And the church's role is to go out and find those people, to be looking for those people as you're living life out in the world, and to solve those when they come up versus waiting for someone to come to you. And the church has not been good at that.
Yeah. And I want you to understand that your pursuit of Jesus is the reason you all come together as the church. Okay, that's the one common denominator, regardless of where you stand in your faith. If you're far along in your faith, or if you're just beginning, or you're curious about those things, your pursuit of Jesus, your steps toward Jesus are the reason you come here on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night or wherever you go. But the reality is the church's role is action. It's what Tracy said. It's filling in those gaps. It's going and finding the people that need us to fill in the gaps. It is the unclothed, the unfed, the desperately in need people, that God commands us and challenges us to go and seek and not only just pray for them, which I don't know about you guys, but I've felt like, oftentimes if I actively just say to someone, I'm going to pray for you, I tend to forget.
Yeah.
Right? Or I
You do it
tend to
right
go
then.
home and I just, man, I forgot to pray for them. Or, man, no, someone else is praying for them, so, it's okay if I don't. The reality is we're called to fill in those gaps. And it is praying for people. Absolutely praying over people, praying with people, praying for people. But ultimately it is filling in the gaps.
Yeah, I've gotten into the habit of actually, as soon as someone sends me a text message saying, can you pray for this, that if I do not pray for them right then and there, then I don't want to forget. But
Yeah.
like you said, praying is an incredibly important thing, but we also have a job to do in all of this.
Absolutely. And I think ultimately, too, what he's confronting is that we use this idea of a faith in Jesus that Jesus can provide. Jesus will show up in their life when, just like Tracy said, we have the tools. We have the ability to fill in that gap and simply just live in action for that reason. So 2 bottom points for you in that is that here, and these are bold, okay, and they're kind of blunt, and I'm kind of pulling a James, but here's the reality. If you've truly experienced Jesus, there will be an overflow of action. In other words, someone can look at your life, and it doesn't have to be us as youth leaders or a family member or whatever. Someone can look at your life, and we talked about last week, you living differently. There should be something about you in your relationship with Jesus that someone questions in a good way. What is different? Why, and it's walking into your jobs, it's walking into your classrooms, it's going home and just living that different life. And yes, you still have bad days and all these things, but it's how you respond to certain circumstances and all these things. So there's an overflow of action. You live differently. The other point is the same way. If you've experienced Jesus, your life has changed. And I think oftentimes what happens is we feel like if we ask Jesus into our heart and we make this decision to believe, we're done. Right? It's a one-time decision. It's a putting a stake in the ground, and we're good. Right? We've earned salvation, not because of anything we've done, but because of that faith, and so we stay there. And we've talked about it before. It's kind of like fire insurance, right? Like, I'm not going to hell, so I'm good. Right? But what we're called to as followers of Jesus is faith. It's not a belief. And that's what he confronts, is this whole idea that we can believe and we're saved. Right? And we've taken advantage of this. And he says even the demons believe. And in the name of Jesus, they're in fear. They're in terror. Because there's power in the name. But what he's saying is that we don't stop there. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a camp or retreat high type of deal. It's a lifelong process. And I was thinking about this whole idea of faith, and this is my definition. And you can find the biblical definition of faith in Hebrews 11. But this is my definition. Faith is not just a declaration. It's a true trust and reverence or respect in and of God from which our obedience and action flows. Okay, so in other words, if Jesus comes into your life should be changed. There should be a walk of obedience. There should be action. There should be, Jesus doesn't come into our life to leave us where we're at. He doesn't ask us to change before we come to him, but he also doesn't come into our life and leave us where we're at. He comes to change us, but he comes to make us into who he has created us to be. Okay, and so this whole idea of this belief, right, the basis of belief and kind of just staying here. We've talked about the 5 C's before. Right? And there's a reason there's a line of faith. And there's a reason, if you've never heard us talk about the 5 C's, there's 5 different types of people, or 5 different steps in your relationship with Jesus. There's the community people, which are the lost people. There's the curious people, which are like, I've heard about Jesus, I'm curious, I want to figure things out. They're searching. There's the convinced people, and there's a line right before the convinced people that have made this decision that they believe and they want to put their faith in Jesus. That's a step. That's not the whole book. That's not the entirety of the process. And so that's the challenge. That's what all of this boils down to, is that it's a process. Guys, your faith in Jesus is a process. It's not a one-time declaration. It's not something that, you can, like a coat, that you can put on the hook or the hanger when you're done. Right? It's not how that works. And so we need to be, even in the midst of this time, we need to make sure that our faith is is continually, like, we're fanning into flame that faith that we have. Like, we're spending time with Jesus, right? And we talked about it, we joked about it in week 1. You guys have the most amount of time now to spend time with Jesus. You're without excuse. And I read this article this week on social media, because, let's be real, we all have more time on our phones. I read this article, and it was talking about Jesus, and it's a different perspective. It's Jesus giving us time to reflect. We've become so, especially in America, we've become so enamored with our own life to where we feel like everything that we have is what life should be, right? We've earned this, we deserve this, we're comfortable with this. And in reality, God is saying, no, you need to take a break from this stuff. And I want you to reflect on me. I want you to reflect on our relationship. And hopefully, when this stuff is over, regardless if it's next month or whatever, hopefully not much longer, then you can look back at this time and say, this was a time of growth for me. I was bored out of my mind, but it was a time of growth. And so just be challenged by this. You're going to go into small groups here in a little bit, and Emma's going to give you some details after we play our game and stuff. But I want you guys to go through this in your small groups with your leader, and I want you guys to be challenged by this.
Yeah, I think a big aspect of what you were just saying about connecting with Jesus is the biggest aspect of it. I think a lot of times people, especially people who've been following Jesus for a while, we know that we're supposed to do these things. And sometimes we end up doing things like standing in the gap for people, filling in, those needs, helping with those needs, because we somehow think it will please God. It will make God happy with us because we're doing these things out of obedience. But it doesn't come from that angle. It comes from spending time with God. And then as you're spending time with God, and Mandy said this quote earlier about you can't, You can't have an experience with God and walk away unchanged, something like that.
Yeah.
As you're spending time with Jesus, you become changed. And it's because of that time you spend with Jesus, out of that flows this enamoring with Jesus and this love for Jesus because you spent time with him that kind of spills out in these ways. Versus, I'm going to go out and help this person because then Jesus won't be mad that I did this 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? It's a whole different thing. But I think even for those of us who follow Jesus, we fall into that trap of, I should do this because it's what a believer does.
Yeah. And I think, too, what we do oftentimes is we look at our relationship with Jesus and our faith, and we feel like there's disqualifiers in our life, right? Like we look at our sin, we look at our habits, the things that from our old life where we feel like Jesus should have already shown up and changed those things in our life. We still hold on to these things, or they're still a part of our life. They may not be as large in our life or as common or, as like repeated, but they're still present. Okay, and oftentimes we view these things as disqualifiers when in reality we were reading this book yesterday for student leadership, and it was just really good. Mark Batterson basically says this is we look at our sin as a disqualifier, or these habits or these past issues or whatever we feel like is the negative, right? And we feel like that disqualifies us from God's grace, when in reality it's the main qualifier for it, right? It's the reason that God's grace abounds. It's those weaknesses, it's the negatives, it's the broken pieces of our life where God really wants to show up. And I think James considers that, and he says, like God really, basically what he's saying is there's more to this. There's more to this story. There's more to what I want you and Jesus wants you to get. And you're right there. And you're in this process of growing, and you're just not there yet. And you just got to keep plugging, and you just got to keep experiencing, and you just got to keep spending time, right? And at that fullness, like Tracy talked about.
I probably stole it from Jesus. I'll be honest.
No, it's cool. I would hope so, God's word. But anyway, but like Tracy said, it's, in spending time with Jesus, that's where the action and the goodness and the abounding experience comes from, right? We overflow out of what we feel has changed or what Jesus does in our life and the understanding and realization of that, and we begin to live differently. So, just be challenged by this. I think this is a great section to talk amongst your groups that we'll have later on. But I guess we're going to do this challenge. Are you ready for this?
No.
Are you sure? So, in this comment thing, if you can do like a hand raise emoji or like a thumbs up, how many of you have ever heard of Chubby Bunny before?
Oh my gosh.
Anyone?
It'll take a second. Okay, we have played it before, not very often since I've been here at least. So if you have not ever heard of Chubby Bunny, pretty much the point of it is that you take a marshmallow, put it in your mouth. You're not allowed to chew it. You're not allowed to swallow it, any of those things. You just put a whole marshmallow in your mouth, and you have to say Chubby Bunny. And then the second round starts, and you have to add another marshmallow and say, oh, Trey is very excited.
Oh, yeah, he is. You can come join us.
Then 3, 4, and so on and so forth, and to the point until somebody loses when they either spit out the marshmallows or they can't say Chubby Bunny or they choke. We...
But today's added twist.
Oh, man, no,
because it's Illuminate, and Mandy is making these things up as we go.
to
Actually,
be fair, this was
Credit to
Pastor
Steve.
Steve. This was all
Credit
Pastor
to Pastor
Steve. They all
Elijah
have-
is a champ at this. by the way.
Elijah is a champ. There's peanut butter at the end of these, so basically we're trying to glue our mouths shut.
It's no worse than Skittles.
Yes, it is.
Skittles at the top of the roof of your mouth is
I've been
horrible.
eating those Skittles all.
Oh, that's nasty.
This
Put
is
it in some milk.
Okay.
like paste.
Oh, also, if you want to join us in this game, if you've got marshmallows at home, you don't need peanut butter. It's not a big deal. But you can go with us as we do this challenge, and then you can take a selfie and show us those big bunny cheeks that you have, and be sure to send that to us. We would love to have that. We can show a video of that next week.
Disclaimer though, if you see marshmallows flying at the camera, it is not my fault. I did not say
It's
that.
her idea anyway.
No.
Space yourself.
Oh, okay.
Not too much. Oh, you're gonna go away.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so marshmallow 1.
All right.
Then we'll just go down the line and say
So,
Chubby Bunny.
what makes you good at this game?
I don't.
A big mouth?
I
I have that.
I don't. I'm loud, but I don't have a big mouth.
Tuck it in.
I can't do it, right?
Right.
No.
Daniel. Oh wait, Trace, go.
Chubby Bunny.
Chubby Bunny.
Chubby Bunny.
There you go. 2.
This is. Oh, they're all such. Remy has said Chubby Bunny like 12 times.
Oh,
Okay, Trace.
Chubby Bunny.
Chubby Bunny.
Chubby Bunny.
3. Trace is struggling.
Chubby Bunny. Chubby Bunny. I'm trying to find ways to stick it.
Chubby Bunny.
Chubby Bunny. Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna choke.
Daniel's
Chubby
got
Bunny.
it. That was a good one. Press a bit, Emma.
Come on, hurry up. Hurry up.
Chubby Bunny.
Daniel's just going.
Hurry up.
He's only on one side so far. Oh, he's moving over.
Chubby Bunny?
Was that 5 or 6? I don't know.
Oh, okay, go.
Counting out there. Okay, next one. Daniel's got one. Trace is done.
I can do it.
Are you out too? Oh, Daniel is the champion.
Weakness. We were
Emma's
weak.
not doing it.
That was not even audible sounds.
You don't have to keep going. You won. You're the winner.
Rude, Trey. I was gonna try to make it stick. That's what our goal was earlier. Trey says, I think Emma's going insane from the quarantine. Yeah.
Those are good.
Yeah, they are pretty
Only
good to
because of
snack
peanut
on.
butter.
Well, that was interesting enough.
All right, so explain Zoom.
See if I can catch it.
Oh.
All right, here we go.
No, come on! Oh, we got it. 2.
I'm not good at this game.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, that was on Daniel's beard. I don't want that one.
Oh, no, one's all I got.
I'm terrible at this game.
4 in a row.
Okay, anyway, they can continue to act like that. Anyway,
Oh, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
yikes. Okay, so 6:50, we are going to do Zoom, except we're going to do it a little bit different. Oh man, peanut butter all
That was a
surrounding my
great
mouth.
shot. Anyone
gonna-
play with us? Go ahead.
We're gonna do Zoom at 6:50 again. We're gonna do it a little bit differently, where we are going to break off into small groups, though. We have a way of separating all of us into our own private screens after we all jump on, so you are only gonna be given one code. We are gonna ask you that you bear with us and be a little patient as we get you all organized. I'll explain this again once we get into the big main screen, but just know when you get on it, you are going to have a message pop up on your screen when I get to the point of inviting you, where it's going to invite you to the breakout room. Make sure that you click accept on that, and then you and your small group leader or leaders will be in your own little private space to have that conversation, just like you would here on Sunday nights. We have some questions for you guys to talk about, and you guys can hang out with each other and kind of get that time to talk to each other, because we haven't had that in a while. So here's the code. Be ready for it. 309-000-2222. 309-000-2222.
Also, by the way, Elijah called you both weak, just for the record.
I'm okay with that. Elijah's way.
He said you were weak too. He said.
I was told to stop.
You weren't even making audible noises.
No, Elijah is the champion, but I
Yeah,
thought he was
he
about
is.
to bust a brain
I did
vessel
too,
when
yeah.
we were playing that last
brain
time.
vessel?
I did.
All right.
Anyway, so yeah, 6:50. Jump on that Zoom, and we will see you
In about
then.
20 minutes.